when I cycle there and I just exist and not thinking about it at all, I'm just happy. And but then thinking about these worldview things, it easily gets a bit scary. I have had these discussions that have become quite emotional at times about worldview with a person who is deeply believes that science tells the ultimate truth about reality. And when I question him about this, like questioning, like, don't you see that the map is not the territory? What is the thing in itself that that science models? Well, these are dull questions. I try to formulate them better, but he becomes agitated and often angry. So there is something, of course, these are sensitive issues, worldview. Like if you would go to a religious person and question their worldview, they also become agitated. And maybe I also become agitated about some things, but we are usually blind ourselves to what is really threatening the ground of our being, our beliefs about fundamental reality. And you know this when you get to the core, when you start to become emotional. So it's sort of maybe not any hyper priors, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting because to me, I feel like to be a living system in a world where there really is no ground, as I see it, reality is just this unfolding process. There is no objective up and down or anywhere to really find solid ground. And we're a process, but we're a process that doesn't want to slip, behave in such a way as to not slip into melding in with everything else in reality. And it does that by building up models. And those models can be very simple of that's food, that's not food. And eventually there could be models like there's a God or there's not a God, or all the stuff we're talking about, right? And so in that picture, your very existence is, you're kind of balanced on a knife edge, so it's stressful. There's kind of existential stress right at the beginning because there is no objective ground. So it makes sense to me that as soon as you start questioning, like, these models are how people are surfing this knife edge of, not to mix my metaphors, but it's how they're managing to get by with this existential stress. And so unless, to me, I think people who have really developed a kind of experiential familiarity with groundlessness, people who feel they can sit with the unknown, with non-conceptual experience and are okay with that, those are the people I feel see reality clearest. And they're actually the people who could probably say the least about it, because they would recognize that everything you say is a model, is an approximation. And here we are talking for over an hour probably about with all of our models, so you can read into that what you will. But yeah, so I shared that intuition that people are very, it's inherently emotional because you're tapping into this existential stress when you talk about these issues.
Yeah, existential. It's interesting because it doesn't objectively threaten our existence. It only threatens our worldview. But our worldview, of course, is our existence. The way we experience the world, it is our subjective existence. Somehow I feel that I now put people against each other because we are all prisons of our systems or our own mind. Sometimes I feel like it's a locked-in state where it oscillates between this solipsistic idea that this, my own existence, is the only thing I really know, and that you might be a hallucination, and it's really this psychotic kind of questioning everything. And then on the other side, you can start thinking, here we are interacting. I hear your speech. I hear your thoughts. I can hear your mind, so to speak. And then I feel like this connection, that we are part of the same process. Or when I walk in the forest, I can feel that I'm the same as the forest. And both of these are possible, and it's really weird. How is it possible that everything is one and everything is two at the same time? So it's really weird what is happening there.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I mean, to me, the thing that moves you on that spectrum is how grounded versus kind of anxious you feel. So I think you're right that solipsism can be a kind of psychotic state, because I think most people find it unsettling. It's kind of to think you could be the only mind in existence in a way where you're still holding on to your sense of self. That's the most kind of isolating feeling imaginable. To imagine, as you say, you're locked in and this is it, and you're never going to know anything else. But if you are truly non-attached and you just observe those things, I think you tend to collapse into the opposite of kind of, I mean, I think it's because the more non-attached you get, you lose your sense of self, and then everything just is everything, and you're it all, but not the small you who's the ego who lives in the head, who's anxious, but this big mystical experience of being everything. I'm a big advocate for always bringing this back to how experientially grounded do you feel? Because I think in philosophy, my experience is a lot of people turn to these questions because they have some sense of existential anxiety. I don't get this impression with you, but with a lot of people, that's the impression I get, that there's a desperate need to find a story that's reassuring. So if you're lost in the woods and some traumatic thing happens and you find a map, you might have this really intense desire to believe this map is the one you need that will get you out of the woods. And if someone comes along and goes, hey, I think your map is wrong, or you know what, you can't really trust any maps, you're just gonna be like, shut the hell up, I need to get out of here. I need this emotionally. Do you have the impression that people in philosophy sometimes are people who have this need for a good story, a reassuring story about the world? Or maybe even the opposite, maybe people who are really open to being radically skeptical?
Good question. You put it really nicely, this guy lost in the forest with the map. I don't know, because I only know from my own background how I became frustrated in philosophy. I have my own reasons for being sometimes quite negative attitude towards philosophy, because it is this kind of conceptual play that doesn't get anywhere. It is just circulating the real thing without realizing that there is a real thing. And often it feels like we as philosophers, we should just be quiet. But then again, these are so important things that we, at least I feel the pressure to talk about them. And it's so nice to find other people who think in the same way, or to make someone realize how they are constantly facing this ultimate mystery of existence. Every second of their life, we are facing this. Life is never boring when you realize that. And philosophy can get you there sometimes. Psychedelics can get you there, meditation, many kinds of practices can get you there to realize this. Maybe it's also Socrates' basic point, how little we know. But sometimes philosophy, I became frustrated because it never seemed to capture this idea, but maybe I was doing just the wrong kind of philosophy. Well, Kantian philosophy, this is basically the main point of Kant, that we don't know things in themselves, but somehow that also easily leads to this scholastic system building. And the bigger systems you build, the more you have to lose. When your system just crumbles down in the face of brute existence, Zen philosophy is maybe the best or most honest kind of philosophy, where they basically admit that everything they do is completely insane, because they shouldn't be talking at all. Alan Watts should not have written any books, because it just gets us further from the thing in itself, but somehow it can also act as this kind of Wittgenstein's ladders that get you there and then you throw them away. But you never find those people who really throw away the ladders, who just stop speaking.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when you said that philosophy is kind of circling the thing in itself, that made me realize that I think I've had the same insight that you were describing around the model and the territory when it comes to philosophy. I feel like I've had the same insight multiple times in psychedelic experiences, where I'll find that there'll be a moment where I'm very much in my head thinking about something, and say I'm thinking about consciousness or whatever it is. And at some point I'll realize that I'm engaged in what feels like a really neurotic thing of like a dog chasing its tail, and it's never going to catch it, because no matter what I say, no matter what combination of words I say in my head, it's never going to bite the tail of the snake and and swallow it up. But I think this is I get the impression actually a lot of people who want a scientific theory of consciousness, I think they somehow expect a successful theory to swallow up the territory. And it's hard to put into words, but I get this impression that what they really want, when they think they've found the theory, somehow the lights will go out, somehow experience will stop. It sounds very odd to say, but what I mean is like, it's because I think they're not recognizing that feeling of the kind of miraculous, awe-inspiring thing of like, we genuinely exist. This is really happening. And if you're expecting a scientific theory to make you go, okay, existence and my experience of it is just that, it's just XYZ. Now yes. I don't have to feel awe. That's never going to happen. And I think it's that unconscious neurotic chasing the thing in itself, and it's never going to encompass it.
Yes, exactly. Sometimes I feel that when you look at psychedelic paintings, you often have these recursive patterns. Whether they could reflect some kind of internal process of this recurrent snake chasing its tail, because it's not only about scientific or philosophical theories, it's also about introspection, about this here. Because when I start to conceptualizing this experience here, it's already gone. And now there is another experience. It's a constant flow with no static points. I cannot take an experience here and start to investigate it and conceptualize it, because the moment I make any conceptual processes, the experience or my state of consciousness has changed. And this is one thing that is really difficult to express, put into words. It's like to start with the easy point, or the easy way of formulating the point is to speak of non-reflective consciousness, as in meditation or the psychedelic state, or like these altered states of consciousness where you are non-reflectively present. Your default network is like less active, and you are less reflective, less conceptual. So it's easy to see this, like the brute consciousness in that kind of state. But when you start to think of that, at least I have come to the conclusion that everything is that same brute consciousness. Even this conceptual process here, what I'm doing now, if I'm expressing my own feeling right now that I'm a bit afraid, or I feel this like anxiousness about expressing this difficult issue. So now my consciousness is already different when I do this kind of conceptual process. And my speaking here is also this. It is also this brute unfolding process of consciousness, like this. From the external perspective, they are all just causal processes that just happen. And there is no reflection ever happening. Everything is always brute and primordial. And one way to put it more rationally, or to like intellectually understand it, might be to like focus on that Well, I won't go into that. It would be the topic of an academic paper. Do you understand this idea?
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to pick up on the what you said at the start of the idea of in psychedelic paintings, like a snake that's kind of repeatedly chasing its tail, because you described another experience in the same area that I've had. That, yeah, you described exactly the same experience, and I have this drawing that I'll show you, which is it was kind of me traveling through time in this kind of corkscrew shape. So it's like the circling around of the snake trying to bite its tail, but it's going through time. So it's three-dimensional. And the idea was that, exactly as you said, that you have an instance of experience and then the model forms. And by the time the model's formed, it's never going to catch the experience because it's already happened. And I could just feel that this is our predicament. You know, when we want to model our experience of being, we're always in this corkscrew where it's never going to meet up.